Hello everyone, and welcome to another audio podcast. In a and where in this audio podcast is another Bostix Ruptre. This is an audio podcast in a line to the science of Traption. This is another chartered edition and an evidence based sort of perspective. This is an audio podcast aligned to the Bostix Feature 5, and this is another Storm Bostix production. So, in as part of this audio podcast and this the Bostix Feature 5, I'm going to highlight there'll be an overview in context of a in context of sort of well share some works some works that have been published in around in around 20 in around 2020 and in around 2020, and this works was sort of had been has been sort of works where from a sort of a from a labor in from a basis in context of a laboratory sort of a laboratory medicine sort of aspect, or a laboratory medicine and laboratory and pathology perspective, and at the same time a sort of an educational aspect as well. So this works or this research or this works looked at for example, is there a need for healthcare scientists and educational support surrounding CKD or chronic kidney disease, and laboratory investigations and tests. And this works was an effort where collaboratively a team looked to summarize data that had been collected through a particular social media platform that supports service users, and so I'm gonna provide, or this works will look to provide a basis in around this particular the Bostix Feature 5. So to begin with, patient access to information support to supplement understanding of laboratory and test parameters sort of faces challenges because of medical and scientific terminology. Such terminology is a sort of everyday language for health professionals communicating, for example, with each other. But when professionals communicate with patients or carers, the medical jargon or jargon or terminology can become sort of overwhelming, and such constraints give rise to gaps in appropriate advice, information, and education in several and across several aspects in several aspects of health and disease. The challenges have led to exploration of new and effective ways or efficient ways of approaching sort of educational and information support for patients with long-term conditions. Now, in addition, there has been an increase or a rise in support groups, for example, online online, for example, through social media, such as, for example, Facebook, and through blogs, for example, where patients and carers or service users are sharing experiences and understanding to help increase shared decision making. So it is against sort of this background or this basis that there have been calls for the use of technology in healthcare to improve access to services, to enable better integration, and to delivery of care sort of more swiftly. And so in the United Kingdom, healthcare service providers have been encouraged to use technology in several ways, including moving away from paper to digital records, and offering services through, for example, apps and web portals. The new digital offerings range from administrative tasks to um, to uh, sorry the new digital offerings range from administrative tasks of patient registration, laboratory investigations and tests, booking appointments, and, for example, repeat or rendering um, or repeat or ordering of prescriptions, to the provision of clinical services such as, for example, video consultations and medication reviews. Similarly, patients or service users are being exposed to are being exposed and are sort of with an sort of interplay with a range of technology. Again, for example, including, for example, once again, sort of web portals and social media platforms. So, for example, in this context, the Renal Patient Support Group, or the RPSG, and apps to assess and manage sort of health 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 sort of risks as well. And so this has perhaps become especially important and true for patients with long-term conditions such as CKD. So, align with this, uh, some aspects in around chronic kidney disease, or CKD, and there are several risk factors that interact with the disease, and patients can also again be affected by socioeconomic status, in addition to in addition to age, gender, ethnicity, and, for example, proteinuria may exist, and also where serum phosphate, for example, parathyroid hormone levels, and bone metabolism can potentially be issues. Now, CKD, in line to CKD, and aligned to end-stage renal disease, or ESRD, which is generally a continuation of receiving, for example, hemodialysis, or an alternative form of renal replacement therapies until receiving a transplant. Creatinine remains the gold sort of standard biomarker for renal for the detection of renal insufficiency. EGFR is a calculation that allows a general evaluation of creatinine in blood, filtered over 24 hours. And in this works that had been published, the works sort of provides, once again, sort of a basis in around the stages of in around the five sort of stages aligned to the severity and classification of chronic kidney disease. Now, in context of the healthcare laboratory and new models and sort of new bases of new models of service, or in around service, in around new models of service, the increase in demand for healthcare has also led to year-on-year increase in the number of, for example, laboratory investigations, and where tests are carried out by healthcare scientists, as for example, as for example, allied health professionals, or AHPs. In addition to fulfilling NHS laboratory tests for CKD patients or other LTCs, healthcare scientists are also fulfilling requests that are, for example, not always necessary, are warranted in context of primary care. So, for example, i.e., a potential where there's potential over requesting. So, only healthcare scientists who perform laboratory investigations, for example, can provide specific education and guidance regarding laboratory trends and parameters, when to screen patients for specific diseases, and prompt reference for treatment and/or referral, and thus also shift the cost of healthcare from the National Health Service, or NHS. Technology has Technology has enabled a range of point of care testing, or POCT, or near patient testing, or NTP, and diagnostic kits to be more accessible to patients, thereby improving screening and compliance. But for CKD recipients or patients, understanding disease pathways and test results relevance is still sort of challenging, still a challenge. Um, and the understanding provided by an array, where there is understanding provided by sort of a variety of health professionals related to laboratory tests and investigation, this can add to the complexity. Patients, for example, see several service providers of them, and aligned to the multidisciplinary team, or MDT, at varying times, and may receive and receive sorry and receive and can receive misinterpreted results. Although information technology and exchange of laboratory results through, for example, electronic patient records, or EPRs, have enabled health professionals to share models of care delivery, there are still missed opportunities in primary care to support best practice for the CKD population. So, in line to this, the main drivers for change to pathology and laboratory medicine services, for example, can include number one, a greater need for patient-focused services. Two, the need to embrace competitiveness and plurality of provision. Number three, a requirement to reprofile the workforce to make it better suited to new technology and modern ways of working. Number four, the need for the definition of core data to create a framework to measure efficiency and effectiveness. Number five, recognition of the status of a core clinical service in relation to impact on the patients or service users journey, leading to requirement of laboratory services to be commissioned and delivered as part of an integrated healthcare system, or integrated healthcare basis. And six, the need for a strong leadership. Now, in line to this as well, healthcare scientists in the United Kingdom. So, over the past decade, the healthcare science profession has been advocating expansion in the role of scientists from purely a laboratory diagnostic role, for example, to a more advanced educational focus, sort of providing understanding of tests and investigation results, and the impact or the burden that tests and sort of results have on service users in context of chronic kidney disease, sort of specifically. CKD service users, or CKD patients, for example, often seek education and/or understanding of laboratory tests and investigations to support recommendations regarding the disease pathway. Healthcare scientists have that ability and capacity to extend knowledge base surrounding diagnostics to provide baseline education of laboratory investigations for service users with the long term condition. Although it should be appreciated, that healthcare scientists do not have sort of clinical involvement in patient care. They do have an unused knowledge base. So a real aspect in context of the National Health Service (NHS) is to, or has been to, integrate diagnostics with the rest of clinical medicine or medicine, and to make crucial imaging available in context of CKD care and CKD care for service users on a timely basis to the people tasked with saving lives. Information can no longer, in this context, can no longer really be confined in pathology or any of the ologies. Now, given that most laboratories have now become sort of more automated, routine tasks are now taken by, for example, support staff and delegated to other workers. The knowledge and skill based healthcare the knowledge and skill based healthcare scientists acquired through training become specialized or advanced in healthcare delivery that extends beyond the core pre-registration training for a given area of laboratory medicine or laboratory practice, and skill set required by the healthcare workforce sort of change depending on the level, on the needs and demands, and this also includes diversification. So diversification can take place in several forms, so including the number one, the identification of new markets on new settings for the delivery of certain services. Two, new ways of providing existing services. Three, the introduction of new types of technology such as medication or new therapies. And number four, the adoption of new language to describe existing treatment, for example. And five, for example, new philosophies of care as well. Now, in context of this, there is in this work there is some aspects in aligned to the literature, and I'm going to highlight some of this as well. So, healthcare scientists are involved, where it's been documented in literature in around 80% of all clinical decisions in the prevention, diagnostics, and treatment of a broad range of long-term conditions by the NHS National Health Service. And there is the traditional sense, a traditional sense that scientists have always been involved in the support of healthcare teams, providing test results in the pathology laboratory and as part of secondary care. Understanding some literature has documented some aspects in around sort of the understanding of economics, and also in around smarter, what have been referred to as sort of smarter working would allow better care of service users or patients in primary care. Currently, however, the evidence base for scientists involved in primary care is insubstantial. Healthcare sciences as a hidden service sort of remains largely unchanged, and cross-profession collaborative working is still questionable. Although websites and apps such as, for example, Lab Tests Online, which was established in 2014, provide patients with information on sort of the on the purpose of text and reason for a prescription by a healthcare service provider. The time the time the time is now is perhaps now right for scientists to identify sort of novel ways of working and collaborating in context of healthcare. The novel technology and or point of care testing or near patient testing kits, for example, can prompt healthcare scientists to become more active or proactive in, for example, primary care environments, to monitor to help monitor suspect and high risk as patients or service users for specific long-term conditions, again, such as, for example, chronic kidney disease. Scientists not only authorize, validate, and interpret results, but also know sort of how and why laboratory tests are important in broader healthcare. Scientists could provide baseline explanations on the objective of tests and specific impact of results. Healthcare scientists have, for example, a unique role to play, and scientists need to be able to share scientific knowledge in terms that laymen can understand, but also to help bridge gaps in public understanding relating to clinical scenarios, especially to capture patient reported outcome measures. There is sort of a broader evidence to suggest that more health promotion in community can support the understanding of some complexities relating to laboratory investigations, health, and disease. In some works that has been published, as well, in a mixed method triangulated research approach, three academic institutions, two health departments, and two indigenous organizations collaborated to identify workforce capacity in remote communities through innovative education, and a need through this research that had been published. A need was observed to educate the educators in the chronic care model and in using a population health approach. There should be more practical ways to alter acute disease based practice model that dominates in the healthcare workforce, toward an integrated, systematic, and population based approach. The study highlights, for example, a study highlights that scientists have a broader role in healthcare in the healthcare workforce. In qualitative research to learn what educators across healthcare professions are involved in primary care, help primary healthcare think about interprofessional collaboration. One of the challenges is ensuring clear definitions of providers or service providers and roles and expectations regarding shared care. A definition or defining roles and responsibilities will enhance the positive elements of collaborative interprofessional care and reduce, for example, misunderstandings regarding protocols, procedures, responsibilities, and authority. Collaborative patient-centered care practice is designed to promote the active participation of each discipline in patient care or in healthcare. Collaborative working enhances mechanisms for continuous communication, optimizes staff participation in decision making within and across disciplines, and respect for disciplinary contributions from all health or from all professionals. Unfortunately, in the study that had been published, in works that have been published, there was no participation. There had been no participation from scientists. At a meta-analysis of around 72 independent studies or investigations incorporating, for example, 4,795 teams across a range of industries, highlighted that information sharing positively predicted the performance of the team. Areas where information sharing had been shown to be inadequate are the interface between contexts, such as interdepartmental transfers. However, to improve CKD care plans, the healthcare scientist role could be expanded from purely laboratory diagnostic validation role to educational, thus enhancing smarter and collaborative working. And in line to this, the GP the GP forward review, something referred to as the GP forward review, highlights how primary care could look in the future. Patients or service users want the education, skills, and confidence to take more responsibility of health and feel more in control of outcomes. Channeling this this basis for service that help patients or recipients or service users to help themselves unlocks both a better sort of patient experience and a way to alleviate practice workload. This avenue could open doors to involving scientists more so on the front line, supporting care for patients with long-term conditions. The need for a healthcare scientist in primary care to support practice on frontline, providing education relating to disease trends, for example, can can become or could become important owing to patients with long-term conditions being prompted to self-care. This will this At the same time, this can lead to and should live and should this can also sort of alleviate sort of the so-called technical burden of general practitioners. So in this works the there was the aims and objectives were for example were for example in the main, to explore the perspectives relating educational support surrounding CKD laboratory investigations and tests, and scientists' role from a sample of the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG, and the RPSG service users, and the research team conducted 5 polls from January 2018 to July 2018 to help understand healthcare communication technology needs and importance of healthcare scientists' educational support for laboratory tests and investigations. And the objectives in around this were the following. Number one, to identify to help the objectives around polls that had been conducted were to explore and help answer the five main questions. Number one, would you see a physician other than your own? Number two, how can health professionals better understand and appreciate being in a chronic illness? Number three, what technology solutions are available through your GP or for example your nephrology clinic or nephrology team or department? And number four, if you had access to sort of a healthcare scientist in primary care or community, who could tell you all about your tests your renal tests and investigations, would you access this service? And number 5, how likely are you to use the following future sort of technologies for educational support from a scientist? And aligned to this, aligned to this, the in around the materials and methods around this, the justification for the polls and the sample, for example, on this basis, previous investigations have used surveys and polls of CKD patients or CKD service users, and the general public, and these investigations, these sort of studies or investigations that inspired the poll implementation through the RPSG. And it had been decided between the research team to administer five research team to administer five short polls from January 2018 to July 2018 through the RPSG's closed Facebook social media platform. And ethics in around this ethics committee approval was not required for this work. However, guidelines of British Healthcare Business Intelligence Association were followed at the time alongside GDPR 2018, and this work aimed to obtain an initial perspective from a social media platform. The time frame for the collection of responses to the polls was limited to 6 months, and therefore a sample size calculations was not carried out. Instead a target of, for example, 1,000 responses was set, and it was important to get a representation from various ethnicities using RPSG, and polls were pinned as announcements over the planned duration. And in this works, there's an overview aligned to summarize a summarization of the polls and the questions and the responses. So in line to this, I'm going to highlight some. There will be some aspects that are going to be highlighted now. So in around the polls development and implementation, an initial version of the polls was piloted, and amendments were made to question and phrasing. The updated version of the polls was used to gain responses from RPSG service users, from RPSG members or service users and potential respondents were informed of the reason for the poll, and the anonymity of the responses and ability to withdraw from the polls at any time. In this works, in this publication, there's an overview that summarizes information about the RPSG, the Renal Patient Support Group, and the RPSG, and also context that summarizes in regards to the polls that have been implemented. Respondents or service users and respondents were asked, number 1, again, would you see a physician other than your own? Number 2, how can a health professional better understand or appreciate being in a chronic illness? Number 3, if you had access to a healthcare scientist in primary care or community, who could tell you all about your renal tests and investigations, would you access this service? Number 4, technology support and usage, and for example, what technology solutions are available through GP, general practitioner, and or nephrology department or transplant team, for example. And number 5, how likely are you to use, future technologies for educational support from a scientist, from a healthcare scientist. Now, in around the General Data Protection Regulation 2018, primarily the RPSG is a closed Facebook group, and this website is and the website of the RPSG website is an educational or information portal or basis for service users and health professionals and carers, in aligned to sort of chronic kidney disease. The RPSG is covered under Facebook's data privacy and protection policy. The GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation, creates sort of, or has a consistent has constancy around data protection rules across Europe and the United Kingdom. The GDPR had been in effect from 25th of May 2018 and applies to organizations based in Europe, as well as companies all around the world, or globally, that provide, for example, or offer goods or services, and process data from or about people in Europe and the United Kingdom. So, in keeping with GDPR, the research team did not report any personal identifiable data or PID. So, for example, names, dates of birth, addresses, and or locations of any participants. And in line this, I'm now gonna a bit now in line to this, a bit of an overview aligned to the results in around this works. So the team sought to obtain 1,000 responses from at that time from 1,000 responses from at that time of where the RPSG at that time had 8,000 members or service users using the support group using the social media platform. So at this time, a total of 574 RPSG members participated in polls representing just less than a 10% response rate, specifically representing a 7% response rate. Being an international support group, the respondents had demographics with varying ethnicity, age, range, and sex representation. The polls did not seek to collect data for level of education, employment, and or relationship status. Now, in around poll one, in this published works summarizes the number of respondents who polled yes to would you see a physician other than your own. Over 50%, over 15% respondents, for example, agreed, and 4% disagreed on whether they would consent. Whether they would be content in seeing a renal physician or nephrologist that they would not normally see. And the results from the poll demonstrate or illustrate or highlight that given today's technological advances, or the advances and the use of social media platforms for information sharing capacity to support informed decision making, and CKD patients would see another health professional who would know more about the tests and investigations and the impact of results. In around this published works, there is a figure or an overview in context of the data that has been highlighted that has been highlighted graphically. Now, when considering when considering how help how can health professionals better understand or appreciate the state of a patient with a chronic illness, communication was deemed the most important element. The proportion of respondents who voted for who polled in for more communication was in around 33%, and this poll indicates poll 2 indicated that CKD service users or patients want more communication with health professionals, and the results from this poll also demonstrate that CKD recipients or patients or service users want opportunities to ask questions. So, for example, 9% where the results from this particular poll demonstrated that service users, CKD patients, want opportunity to ask questions. This was around 9% of those respondents who polled in. And health professionals should, for example, another aspect to this particular poll in around poll 2. Sorry, another option in around poll 2 of this particular poll was and health professionals should listen to patients or service users more often. The respondents who polled in with was 12%, where 12% of the respondents polled in on that particular poll, and more opportunity to communicate about CKD laboratory tests and investigations would also increase health literacy as one of the bases in around this particular poll. Similarly, when CKD service users or patients were asked if they would access a system wherein a healthcare scientist in primary care or community could not tell could tell them about renal tests and investigations, 77% of respondents polled yes, and 17 answered as no for this particular question. And given that service users and patients are being prompted to self-care more, and CKD being a clinical chemistry or laboratory long-term condition, patients want to gain sort of more understanding of tests and impact of results through a healthcare scientist, since these are health professional or allied health professionals who know about the disease sort of intricately. Access to healthcare scientists would be especially pivotal for patients or recipients or service users in CKD stages 3 through 5, where laboratory investigations, for example, have been documented in literature as frequent. And so, in line to this, when asked about technology and its usage, for example, what technology solutions are available through your GP, through your general practitioner or nephrology department, or nephrology departments, in around the nephrology departments, for example, as well. A portal allowing access to medical records and laboratory results scored high. So, for example, where 26% was highlighted, which also demonstrates that 74% of patients do not have a portal allowing access to medical records. A total of 22% of respondents checked lab results through a general practitioner and or a nephrology clinic or a transplant department. Online appointment booking and appointment reminders, which means which means that 78% of patients at the same time do not have a portal or basis allowing online do not have a portal or a basis allowing online appointment booking or appointment reminders through GP and or through general practitioners, for example, and a nephrology clinic or nephrology departments. Digital patient comms in around digital patient communications or comms. For example, email or text messaging. Email and text messaging was used by 17%. So 17% of the respondents, indicating that 83% of patients do not have a portal allowing digital. Again, the highlight that do not have a portal for allowing digital comms through general practitioners, and or transplant departments or nephrology departments, and repeat prescriptions. In line to repeat prescriptions was opted by 15% of the respondents, which also demonstrates that 85% of service users or respondents do not have a portal allowing repeat prescriptions through general practitioners or nephrology clinics or transplant departments. What is also intriguing, what's been documented in this particular publication, is that person-centered education or centered education, for example, in and around laboratory and other aspects, was documented as low as 3%, indicating that 97% of recipients or service users do not have access or receive a centered education. Only 1% agreed when asked about remote laboratory advice education through a healthcare scientist, for example, which highlights that 99% of service users do not have access or receive laboratory remote education through, for example, general practitioners or nephrology clinics or transplant departments. This also reiterates that online apps and electronic patient records, for example, are not supportive, because having access to test results or investigations, test results without the educational knowledge behind them is not complete care. And so, in line to this, there's graphic in this publication that highlight some aspects in around that in line to this, and on that basis. And then 26% agreed that when asked how likely are you to use the following future technologies for educational support from a scientist to receive, for example, text messages or communication regarding laboratory tests and investigations through, for example, a service user app, or on your phone, on your smartphone, or for example, to support educational requirements or needs. 25% agreed to access a remote healthcare scientist for education through a service user app on a smartphone, and 33% were likely to access electronic patient records. Were likely to access a remote healthcare scientist, through, for example, a computer or app, a computer or an app. And for CKD service users or CKD patient, it is important that a healthcare scientist, for example, i.e. those who have an understanding around tests behind pathology scenarios, provide educational support surrounding laboratory investigations and the impact of the results. This is this has perhaps been in a sort of consistent or has been documented as consistent with service users or patients having access to results through electronic patient records, but an added stage is required whereby they have education to support interpretation of results. So in line to this now, some aspects pertaining to uh, to uh, to um, to um, the the discussion aspects in around this works. So evidence indicates a proportion of CKD patients or service users access online health records intermittently, but over extend durations. The patterns and timing of use indicate indicate service user intrigue in detailed information such as recent test results and clinical letters. Clinic letters. However, this does not immediately translate that, for example, service users or patients know what results mean. Thus, health literacy is still an issue. Patients with long-term conditions seek more background and understanding relating or in regard to health and well-being to take ownership of disease and they also tend to do this. They tend to do this faster. Service users tend to do this more faster through online means and otherwise than some of the very health professionals who look after them. Telehealth links for video consultations, imaging, and laboratory data could also enable scientists or healthcare scientists to be involved in discussions with patients and carers and service patients and service patients and carers or service users remotely. So, for example, digital, where it's been documented, and this as a bit as a sort of a general terminology, as for example, digital scientists through, for example, multidisciplinary team meetings or MDT meetings. This would be advantageous given the population is living longer. And whilst patient or service users are in line to electronic patient records, for example, has been evaluated in several investigations or studies. Patients continuing use of electronic patient records over longer terms have not been reported, although certainly clinicians report that consultations with some service users have changed because of service user access to electronic patient records. Patients still have questions about, for example, tests and healthcare. At present, for example, as well, estimated glomerular filtration rate or EGFR guidance between primary and secondary teams is shared electronically. Guidance of those who screen or those who to screen and when is also shared electronically between healthcare sites. This can cause discrepancies between sites and laboratories. Thus, renal results and care differ across sites and sectors. This can cause ongoing concerns to CKD service users or patients, and the understanding provided by a mix of healthcare professionals relating to laboratory tests and investigations can also be confusing because service users or patients see many members of the MDT multidisciplinary team at varying times and can receive misinterpreted understanding. So in around this the strength and limitations and implications to practice around implication to practice and research in this publication. Although so in line aligned to strength and limitations. So although the overall respondent rate was low, and the polls received 164 responses, so 29% from members from RPSG members or service users over the duration of implementation. This was one of the first exploration investigations through a support group or social media platform, and through a support group and social media platform to inform how healthcare scientists could be involved in healthcare in educational support for service users. The investigation also adds to previous work considering sort of the perception of scientists supporting best practice. The data collected was limited by its the sample size and duration. However, the RPSG is an international social media platform, and overall there was representation for from all ethnic groups. The results unfortunately could not be extrapolated to the UK general population with confidence. However, the respondents to the polls showed or highlighted a range of characteristics representative of an international general population. In aligned to implications to practice and research, educating healthcare professionals about the importance of, for example, service user sort of a service user basis, and how to sort of interplay with service users is an interplay with service users is another is has been documented as another focus of investigation. Evidence indicates that healthcare professionals using sort of professional or expert language or technical jargon without service users or patients having knowledge in the first instance will continue to act as a barrier to communicate. Targeting the attitudes and behavior of service providers through potential solutions is important so that the relationship between the patient and the service provider is balanced and smarter. The polls conducted through the research team have added value to an important topic, encasing, for example, scientists' involvement, provision of education surrounding laboratory investigations and tests for service users and patients in CKD. Greater use of skill mix will be important if the UK is to offer CKD service users sort of choice. The aim should be to equip recipients or patients or service users with education and knowledge base to ensure they have a basis for shared decision making at all levels of health, to ensure that they have shared decision making at all levels. Now, in around the sort of main sort of conclusion around this works. Little is understood about the service users and patients' understanding of results received through electronic patient records, and only having access may not guarantee that patients or service users know how to use the information. Patients or service users and carers still want more face-to-face understanding of test results, or at least have health professionals be part of online support group or social media platform discussions where they can get healthcare. Scientists who have trained to acquire variable skills across practice and across specialties could perhaps apply an educational base to support patients or service users with long-term conditions and in context of primary care. This could bring a much required or needed healthcare professional asset into primary care, and digital scientists or e-clinics with healthcare scientists could be another way, progressive proposition. And so as technology sort of develops, there will be more pathways for scientists to there should be more sort of pathways for scientists to implement skill sets where education and knowledge sharing for CKD service users or patients is concerned. Smarter working, smarter working will help in meeting challenges on educational needs in primary care to support service users or CKD patients. This will also should reduce all of the fatigue, increase streamline flow of services, and also reduce service strain. There is now potentially more scope, or should be more scope, where scientists could support CKD patients with smarter education surrounding laboratory investigations and parameters. So that draws this Bostix feature, the Bostix feature 5, to a close. This has been an audio podcast aligned to the sites of Traption, Bostix Ruptre, an audio podcast aligned to a Chartered Edition, an audio podcast from an evidence-based overview, and audio podcast aligned to another Storm Robotics production. Thank you for tuning in.